welcome to the show. Today's guest is Cameron Turner. He's a designer based in Santa Monica, California, where we are now in an awesome space, and it is unbelievably beautiful here. He's worked with many Fortune 500 companies such as AT&T, Microsoft, Samsung, Qualcomm, just name a few. Cam is also the community founder of Circle Black, described as a Black community of do something people. Circle Black strives to make a difference to the overall economics of Black America, building its own platform to serve the community in a way that doesn't require much outside help. So with that, Cam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, man.
All right, man, there's a lot I want to tuck into with you today, but first is thank you so much for this space. It's such, I don't know, there's something about speaking in such a comfortable, wonderful space that makes conversation very easy.
I'm part of the, I've always, somehow, I didn't do it on purpose. Somehow I lived in third-story buildings in the in the third corner, and the owners are the best unit, and it's just because they show it to me. I don't really decide I'm just rolling up, let me get this thing, and it always ends up being this quiet Zen space, and I'm just want it, and there's barely any sound in it, and people when they come in, they're just I just feel chill, and I'm that keeps showing up. So I got to just foster it, I guess,
I love that,
keep man. The furniture low, keep everybody happy, I guess.
I love that, man. If I was to have my own version of that, every time I get a house, some looming disaster happens immediately. So I've got a different version of your story.
We got to get you one of those diffusion things above your house. It just blocks things.
I hope so, man. I bought a new house last year and instantly had to replace the furnace day 3, 100%. But that doesn't sound that bad. Or sorry, the water heater. My mom lives in a apartment in the house, and I left yesterday, or I guess left the day before, and the back door fell off the house onto my poor mother.
Oh, and no. It's not funny.
Well, it is funny.
Okay, you laugh.
She's fine. Okay. She calls me. She's like, I'm so sorry to interrupt your work. And I was thinking she's going to be like, how do I turn something on? I'm like, okay, Mom. She's like, the door fell on me. I was like, ah! She's fine.
It's a great title. It's by the way.
By the way, shout out to Patrick for helping my mom. I appreciate it. All right, Cam, back to you, man.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yes, a great person. So let's start with, why don't you tell us about Circle Black?
Circle Black, honestly, it happened because I thought I was going to make something really complex. I was I'm going to make this platform that's going to do all these things for my community. Cause I had been developing software for 15 years. So it's give me the right number of fivers and I could probably pop out something useful, really good for my community. But I realized, I did this whole questionnaire and I was just what do we need? Obviously there's things like commerce and anything, and I was but underlying all of that was nobody has customers because there's a billion reasons for that, but nobody can find their own community of customers, which was such a confusing thing. If we're supposed to be in the same community and we have some degree know where we are, I realized we don't even know how to find each other. If I just wanted to have an event and tell everybody, there were so many mechanisms in the way to tell other Black people. There's digital ones that are extremely racist, and there's other ones that are institutionally in the way so that you can't say a bunch of things to Black people. Even there's old housing and fair acts and all these things that you can't do ads, or you can't actually use reach tools to reach my own community. And that just kind of pissed me off. As a designer and developer, I was what does it mean I can't get to these people? And I saw platforms kind of responding to how I was doing things. Even MailChimp blocked me just because I was saying the word Black people. Their legal department felt good about it too, and all these people, Amazon Pay blocked me. And I was just trying to set up simple newsletters. This is what's going on in your area, right? And then as I'm doing this, I'm getting the other email lists, and I'm oh, how do I do this? But I saw so much opposition in the beginning of just simple setup. I wasn't even expecting, to do much. It was just simple setup. And when that happened, I was oh, this has to be an offline tool before it'll ever be an online tool. And I realized I can't build anything around community unless I build a community. I can't just show up, I can't just say oh, I like this tool and people use these kind of tools. Let me put this in my community. My community is so niche. It's so specific. It's born out of necessity, and then it creates commerce because someone's paying attention, and so in that small lifespan of like who we are and what we're doing, we are not even able to capture it ourselves and then say like how we want to build on it, make commerce on it, anything like that. It's kind of just quickly taken. And so everyone having to broadcast what's going on, what we're doing, was kind of the main problem. It's like a free funnel to find out this particular niche group of people who's doing new things. They're telling you. They're basically telling on themselves. And so with all these social media platforms basically ingesting us by machine learning and learning how to like refeed us back what we want, I was like, the offline element is the only part where like no one's gonna be able to take that from us. And so it's very clear that like if we don't know where we are, we need to have events. Like we just need to have simple events. It doesn't mean we need to shake some hands. We need to talk about community hierarchy. Honestly, like we need to talk about like operators versus celebrities, right? Like there's community operators who are really making change in communities, and there's people who are like, I can tell 10,000 people something, right? And those two people never work together, right? Not truly. The celebrity expects to get through to this person through a brand. That brand never helps that person. That never gives them that money. And I have been seeing that cycle and working in technology and working in advertising marketing. That's why I was like, these people never see the money. Every tech company had pledged all this billions of dollars. I left Amazon in the middle of the pandemic just to say, if I built an event platform, aka like a Black Eventbrite, if the worst case scenario is I have 10 events a month in the top 5 Black cities, the worst case scenario is 100 people come to those a month, and we kind of like know what's going on in your own city, like with your own community. And more than that, I started to see just very simply by having simple dinner parties, right? And luckily me, I'm one of the operators. I'm in fields where I get to pull in creatives. I get to pull in all sorts of technical people. I get to pull in all sorts of customer service, like different pillars of commerce and different people in community. And we intern college students along the way. And so I was sort of this large intersection of all these people who were asking for the same thing. And instead of giving them what they think they were asking for, I was like, it sounds like you need 3 more people like you. Because 3 more people like you would make everything you're doing simpler. And the currency I really realized in the midst of all this was that people don't know how to make friends anymore. They don't have a very simple process to go. And I play basketball, so I get to go to the gym. I get to embarrass some people. I'll be honest. Like I get to embarrass some people, and then they humble themselves and they're like, "Hey, you're pretty good." And then we have a great conversation. I'm not like, "Yeah, you're bad." We have a great conversation. I get to know who they are. I make friends consistently through means that are possible for me, right? But not everybody has those, and so I started noticing. Overall, just Circle Black was just a replacement for block parties that kind of like got dwarfed by economics or politics or licensing or all these things around like why people can't gather, and just say, hey, how do we make it easy that if you can gather, it shouldn't be that you can't do it again. And that was when I started realizing the real value in like all this data crap I learned along the way was like, if you have an event, the number one issue is like, how do I tell those same people again? Right? That sounds stupid, but that's such a large problem. It's like, how do I tell those same people that came to last event to come again? And how do I tell them to tell a friend? Because I know that they want to tell a friend. Right now, technology is sitting in the middle of that, and it's like, no, don't get that email. No, don't see that. Like, no, don't do all this. Like, the community is just like being blocked by so many, mechanisms, right, on why you can't find these people. And I realized that offline, you can't replace that. If I shake your hand, if I hug you, if we do cool exercises, my sister has a body butter company, and we do exercises where we massage each other's hands. We get to know each other like really intimately in these spaces, and you leave with an actual friend, and it's not because we made you, it's because like you really got to know somebody and they live down the street from you and you never realized that they were over there and you never could talk to them. And that currency was like, oh, I don't care about anything else. Because every time I saw people making friends, I was like, oh, I'll burn cash all day long, like to see like, we put a comedian in a room, or we put a comedian in the room as a host. We put an artist in the room as someone who performs at some point in the night. Either it's 2 or 3 parts of their act. We pay everybody. That was important to us. And the last part was, food. Like all you need is entertainment. Like the comedian's a host. He or she gets us through really tough conversations because they can bring it up and then bring it down and bring it up. And I knew that responsibility was something that like you can't facilitators. Like no one wants to do that. Like no one wants to sit with a facilitator and like. Almost day, it's great, but like that's an individual journey. It's usually typically someone's going down that path by themselves, but when they're with friends, they want to have space to jump around, have ideas, eat some food, have some drinks, smoke some weed, make a friend, do none of the above, and do part of it. And I think when I saw how simple just that was happening with the right, I always say like create the conditions. When I started consistently creating the conditions, the same feedback can continue, and it started to scale. And I was like, all right, I don't need to reinvent some wheel. I'm going to push dinner parties in every location that I can. And then the next thing is like, how do we push activity? So like there's, like to get to know each other. And then how do we like get to know each other, like going outside? Like how do we have hiking? And so we have hiking, we have yoga groups, we have all sorts of groups that like otherwise would have had events, but the same number of problem is like, I can't be an influencer because I can't make the content, tell the people, do all the sales. Like people expect you to be able to solve all these problems in such a complex space. And so I come to them and I say, you're an event producer. Produce events. Circle Black as a site maintains and retains a community. We have free events, so they're always going to want to come. Any event you bring on, whether it's paid or otherwise, is going to be a perk. It's a great perk to us. And like we're going to find a way through partnership to make sure events are affordable for people who are in certain areas where they don't necessarily get to find out about like shrimp dinner events, and like get invited and it's free. Or $15, And so I've had to subsidize a nice amount just because I was like, I want to see this grow. And then as I started to partner with restaurant groups and like other people who would bring in resources, even artists who were like, yeah, I can help do this. The cost went way down, and a community starts to do that on its own. And then now I realize like, if I just put the right key places in there, people can make money, right? And that's where I was like, if I get to the point where I can easily invest in things and it doesn't like dampen, my overall and everything we're investing in, and then people who I can afford to invest a certain amount to have events. Yeah. These people who are having events end up making money, right? So if they make money sooner than me trying to figure out the margin on like whether I like lost $200 or like I could make that, I can find out how to fix that $200, but they can't, right? I can find out how to fix $1,000. Like, maybe I'll get a sponsor, and like I've been in that world, but they can't, right? And so they don't have the event, and so that part of it where it's just like click event, have the event. As soon as you post it, people show up. Like you don't have to know everybody, and that's kind of another great thing about it is that no one posts things thinking like, oh, this is only for certain type of people, And that's also part of us fostering like who we bring in and who we partner with is making sure that it's not about like gatekeeping and anything that makes people feel like they're being put in some hierarchical situation where they can't participate,
Yeah. So first of all, I love it. There's so much stuff there about just like not asking permission and just doing, which I love. Like it speaks to me. If you were to explain to someone who's like totally uninitiated, had no idea, what's the simplest way that you'd explain what Circle Black does?
It is a event platform that retains the community. That's it, right? That's all it does. Like so when you, it's like a Facebook, but you don't have to go find friends to add.
Yeah.
Right. And by retaining the community, it continues to breed the same type of attraction as opposed to like a catch-all website where it's like anybody who sees the link will sign up and go, right? Only people who are in the community will see the link. Anybody we invite to that event is likely to also be invited to the community. So there's a little bit of responsibility in there. And I think that's something that I prefer to press up on my own culture. Like there's spaces where we can put more responsibility in where we kind of like, just like, oh, let me just see how it goes. It's like, well, we can have some intent for that and like make sure that it doesn't just kind of go left, So
what's the reach of it today?
Reach it right now, I think is like 9,000 people, but
that's good, man.
It's something. Yeah. I mean, especially when you count the diaspora, but, but I think I was really focused on community leaders first. Right. I wanted to give really like, if a person was, a community leader in Chicago and they had programs and things that they were trying to reach in Philly, like that is a black hole. You know what I mean? Like that is a black hole in our society of like basically charitable organizations have no reach to each other that will make it very clear how they can work together. And that was like what I was doing by bringing these dinners together. It's like very clear. You just have dinner, you get to know each other. It becomes a cohesive community. As the external events start to grow, my goal is just let it become anything, right? I say this a lot. It's not about me. It's not about my ideas. I've brought on many women along the way. Women run communities. They should. They have always. They will continue. All the women that I bring in are a lot of them are pillars to how I now have perspective on like how communities grow. And like my goal is to step back.
Yeah.
As I continue to help grow. I am fortunate enough to be able to say, yeah, I can go talk to a large company and help money generate, and I can build platform and stuff like that. But I didn't want to now go solve every problem. I was like, okay, we're community leaders. I will give you money in scenarios where you don't have money. I will give you help in scenarios where you don't have help. And I can find more people who can do the same. And the permission thing, I think I'm glad you focused on that, is because I think what I realized is that like, as simple as what I was asking to build, it didn't exist. And I was like, what? Why not? And it was like, and I realized the walls and the things that will come require somebody who doesn't care, you know?
Well, yeah, like for something to exist, it just takes one person to be like, oh, I'm going to make this thing exist. Well, it takes one person to be like, oh, that doesn't exist. And then that same person or someone else to be like, well, I'm going to make it exist. Right. And it doesn't mean that person or the people that come after are going to be successful or whatever it is, but like the daring of just not asking permission and just doing it is something that I always find fascinating, because it comes with like that rush of like, hell yeah, I'm doing this. But it also usually comes with a bit of a downside where people are like, who are you to do that?
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, I you know, some fallen people before me, and I got to work with some of them, whether it's Nipsey, whether it's Michael K. It makes it clear, like, and I've talked to like some of the world's lead, like one of these lawyers. I mean, when I first started Circle Black, he was like, you realize like to some degree you might be in danger. And I was like, what? And he was like, well, yeah. He's like, think about who you worked with. Think about radars. Think about people who keep track of people, right? Like, at a certain point, like you have to know that like when what you're building has been to some degree not that exciting to others to see built. And some of those people died along the way. So it was less about like, do I want to do it? It was like, people keep dying trying to do this. How can I do that and not die?
Yeah.
And then also, I know it's not funny, but also like, if I'm here, I have the responsibility, because I'm here, I'm smarter than them, right? I have some amount of information that they don't have now.
Right.
And that's where I was saying earlier, like, that's like my responsibility. It's like, if I know something that like Nipsey didn't know, if I know something that Michael K didn't know, and like, again, they were celebrities trying to bridge a gap to social equity and stuff like that. And like, that leap is huge. And it requires expectation of partnership that like, you should stop expecting. You know what I mean? And you mentioned earlier, like outside help. It was like that process of expecting to get big and turn this money faucet this way is like, it's a fake goal pattern of like, oh, we're going to get there. And, you know, and I have a tattooed on my body, strong move in silence, you know, and I've heard that when I was Jay-Z said it when I was a kid, and it hit me, and I was like, oh yeah, it's strong move in silence, the weak start riots, you know, and it was like, yeah. But then it was like, everybody's not going to go to the riot. Everybody's not going to go to the White House and argue legal cases. You know what I mean? Like, someone has to do something different. Yeah. And all of them are not yelling and screaming their roles, right? They're like, okay, I know what I got to do. And I don't think myself like any different than like the lawyer. I think myself less of the lawyer who has to go do this in the midst of filibusters and all sorts of ridiculousness, right? I'm just like, worst case scenario, it's people in a room, you know, and I always believe 8 people can change the world. It's proven it over and over, like PayPal Mafia. Like, it doesn't matter who I can show you. The Wolf Pack, Tyler the Creator, like his friends. Like, I can just go down the line of different spaces and art and culture and different groups of people who have changed the world. Because if essentially most people, if this many people know about them, they change the world. And so I just was like, if I keep creating conditions for 8 to 10 people to meet and change the world, then I can't really fail. Like, everything else I've done so far is like the setup. You know what I mean? I learned all the things, I put the things in place. It's less about me like, what am I gonna do? It's more like, here we go. It's like that Mario, here we go. Like, you know, every day, like you log in, it's like, here we go. Like, stop worrying about it. Like, the game's on. Like, here we go, you know?
You ruined Spencer, man. Now he's done. You got him. All right. Let's go back to that reach. I think reach 9,000 is crazy. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. When did Circle Black start?
I mean, it technically started January 2020.
Okay, so 2 years, basically 2 years of growth. When you say 9,000 people, is it 9,000 people like West Coast, local? Like where are those 9,000?
I would just say like East to West Coast.
East to
There's
West
some
Coast.
people outside of the country, but they're like trickling here and there, like Risa, people that, Canada and like some places and small places in Africa, and like just small areas that were like dropping a pin, sort of, right? But because we would like to grow in such an intentional way, that also means we have to document it. And so part of the reason LA was the focus is because LA is the shadiest community on the planet. And I started here on purpose. So I was like, no one wins at this here. Nobody. It doesn't make sense to the format in which people enter and leave the space ignores community. And on top of that, the incumbent community doesn't trust anybody who has arrived. So I was like, cool, this is going to be an interesting opportunity for me to bridge like a very fairly afraid community who's like everybody who comes in here messes up our stuff. And it's proven. And people who are like, hey, I want to help make LA better. I moved here. I have money. I have resources. I'm Black. I'm interested in like being a part of things. And, I see from the outside and I want to help. And then kind of just closing that weariness. It's like, it's a trauma state of like, we don't even trust our own. Right. Yeah. And I think by being here, I was like, let me just start that here. New Orleans, like we have a pen down, we have like I dropped the group down there and like, it's poised to grow fast. The community, New Orleans is just amazing, different community. Like they've gone through so much. They're the oldest city probably in the country. I mean, I know it's older than New York just because of the history, but like, the expectation of what they were trying to get over and get through so many different times, I think it teaches that community to ignore some things in the midst of things and still do things together. Whereas like other places now have gotten that. And so I went around different cities. I studied, like I asked community leaders in each one and I was like, what do you need? What do you want? What's happening actually? What are the missing resources? People say pretty much the same things. And to be honest, like a lot of people just spend money in areas where they think they're supposed to like join the gentrification bandwagon and they end up losing money. And so I started realizing like if I could just, like I said, if I could just get 5 people in each city, right? 5 people in each city, like who are kind of like me, right? Who have enough money, who have enough reach, who have enough, influence. If 5 in each city and they all know each other, like that seems like a pretty cool, like consortium, you know what I mean? Of people who could probably do something useful if one of them had like a spark or a flag in the air and was like, this is what I'm doing. We could all kind of react to that. And then it started to grow faster than that because focusing on where the events were and when the events would happen and what they're happening around now starts to be the focus. But the reach, I was less focused on the reach because I honestly, if I was being realistic, I could have grown it a lot faster. But because that reach now is sort of creative behavior, that slowly started to be, I can step back and then like the behavior persists, right? And then like, I used to say this thing, and when we would have, when I would like talk at the dinners like that, it's like, we don't allow fuck shit, and I'm sorry that's not okay on the podcast, but like, we don't allow fuck shit, which is like a phrase of like people willing to take advantage of each other. Oh yeah, well listen, man.
Swear 8,000 times.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
cool. All right. Well, we don't. I say this very simply, and I say it very focused. It's like I don't allow fuck shit, and all that means is that you probably gotta deal with me.
Yeah.
You don't like people should not want that problem.
Right.
Because I don't want your problems so much, and I do so much energy and effort never to have problems. By the time I have a problem and someone wants the problem, you don't want that problem. Because then I become very focused, and I don't want anyone to go there, and I try my best to help everybody get through scenarios without anybody like having unnecessary conflict. So that being said, the biggest thing was making sure that in the midst of that, I was preparing a space that was safe for women.
Yeah.
And that was like something that, again, that I learned along the way that was like, oh, I have to think about this hard.
Yeah.
I think about this really hard because women are super perceptive, right? Even in the process of like what they're looking at, what they're being invited to, who else is going to be there, like, is this going to be okay? And like, if you get that situation right, and like I said, bringing in women and making sure that I'm not the sole decision maker on that kind of stuff made it a lot easier. So the reach itself is great, but I think it's poised to grow faster once we really get some of the event partners in place that we want to focus on to have more reoccurring events.
Yeah.
So that way people, when they log into the platform, they were like, oh, okay, I see kind of the vibe of everything that they're offering. And then when there are big events or things that, jump in that litter, it's not necessarily the expectation of the platform, but more so like driving around community. There's a volunteer event, there's a yoga, there's, we're having coffee in the park, free, come hang out. Like nothing difficult to hop into. So
Yeah, well, you said a bunch of stuff I want to circle back on. One is like I love when he says like people don't know how to make friends anymore. Like, yes, and it's like Spencer, you'll get there someday. As you get older, like you're like, God, what happened to all my friends? Like I used to have like 50 friends, now I have like 3.
yeah,
Like people's lives change, things get different. How do you make friends? It's really interesting in the pandemic. So I think, as I was sharing with you earlier, my background is as a therapist, and like having that like cut off from your communities, horrible for everyone.
it's terrible.
And as people are starting to emerge, I think I've talked to a lot of people who are like, I have anxiety about being with people again. That's not health-based. It's like I've developed a kind of weird social anxiety. That idea of creating a stability of events and different kinds of events where the same people are going to show up and they're your people. That creates that consistency of like just the quality, like it's like the chemistry of life. I love that. And unfortunately, in today's world, there's so much going on. Finding that rhythm, like that rhythm amongst the chaos, is extremely difficult because you're so distracted by everything. So I love the consistency it allows people to get from a community perspective. But the thing I'm super interested in getting into, and like you mentioned this a couple of times, the gap between celebrity and operator. And I think we've all heard this. It's like, oh, you've got this like, these billionaires, if they just took their money and put it into the community, like they could solve all the world's problems, and they don't do that because they're bad people. It's like, I don't know. Like, I'm sure out of all of the billionaires and millionaires, there's been people who've been like, I should do that. And then there's been an inability to do it on some level, or something's happened. Are we just saying that everyone just gets to a certain level and they're so rich that they stop caring about humanity? Or are there barriers between celebrities and real rich people and the ability to help the community? And not that you'd have the answer, but like, what's your perspective from like, what's the gap between celebrity and operator and celebrity and community?
The parable I would use is Susan G. Komen.
Okay.
Is one of the largest charitable organizations in the world. They're pink. Everybody loves them. When I was working on their stuff, I realized like they're pretty honest about it. You have to be when you're charity. They only give 6% back of all the money they receive. That's the lowest legal limit for a charitable organization.
Did you say 6?
6%.
For all the money that comes into a charity, they only give 6% of it out to the people that it's intended for. What happens to the rest of it?
They make up budgets. They make up budgets for people, organization types, labs, things that like probably honestly don't exist. And I was really young having to learn that. And I was just like, damn, like, what does it mean to have that much money? And if you have that much money, you're likely knowing a couple things. It's not that easy to do it again. It could run out. Taxes are high. Other things. But at some point of enjoying your money, I think you disassociate, right? And like, I got lucky as a kid. Like I grew up in the projects, but then like when my grandmother took me in, I basically ended up with a Michelin star chef, right? And I was like, I didn't realize it, but like I became this amazing athlete because I had the food. Right. I thought it was because the school was making me better and all the other stuff, but I just had better food. Right. You know what I mean? And like, there's a lot of things along the way when you're like focused on earning. And as a person who did that, I focused on earning. I was like, earn. You're never going to be near community. You're never going to be near decision making that's built in sacrifice and stuff like that. And the relationships you have, especially if you focus on earning, and you can't be a billionaire unless you focus on earning. You can't do it on accident. The drawback is that if people aren't doing what you're doing, then it's kind of like, I can't go. You can't come with me. I don't want to go with you. And And I watch a lot of celebrities along the way. They're athletes or musicians, whatever the case is. I believe in the beginning, it's just like your free time changes, you know, and like, oh yeah, I just got different free time. We do this instead of that. What you care about obviously will change because your free time changed. And then over time, I can't like define why people stop caring about the larger issues. I can't like, I'm sure they don't stop caring about the issues. It's more like, oh, I don't really know how to do anything, you know, like you just said earlier. But I think what they don't realize is how many operators it takes to get there. It doesn't take that many operators to get there. And I'm not sure why that is. I think there's just in general an amount of investment in your time that once you know a certain amount and that's all you're focused on, you're just not going to know more things. And I think with certain types of leaders we can't really call them leaders. We can say celebrities who have influence. I don't just naturally call them leaders. I never have. It's kind of a point of mine, but like there are influential people that people like, charismatic, right? And that doesn't mean they have a plan, you know? And I think if you've been successful, you believe most plans you're gonna make are gonna work. Mm-hmm. And that's just the problem of the matter. Especially if I walk in a room full of people who have less than me and like, I think I have a plan, it's gonna go wrong, right? And overall, like it's just empathy training. Like it doesn't take much for somebody to just go, oh, I need to refresh my empathy training. You know what I mean? And like, oh, I don't know anything and I don't know what's going on and I need to delegate to people who know better and, you know, be humble. But I don't know that like their surroundings are prepared for them to maintain that scenario. And this kind of goes into me and my sister I talk to her about this all the time, like about like somewhere along the way, we were expected to have a personality that was meant to be like known, right? Like, you know me, I know me as a person. But obviously there's inner thoughts to me that I know to my bone to be true, things I think, things I'm like, nah, that's whatever you said. Like, I still think it, you know, I'm not going to like fight you on it. But there's a person in there who like decides things based on to their bones. Like I'm for sure about this thing. And then there's this other person where they're like, I need people to accept them, like them, you know, invite them to things, whatever the case is. And society actually asks you to be bipolar. It's asking you up front. It's not saying don't do it. It's saying do it. Be bipolar, please. But like, but know yourself, right? But that's a hard game to play at the same time. And I think when a celebrity or whoever it is expected to be influential, they're so focused on one personality, and then they forget the personality. Like they always say, where's your inner child? All of this stuff. Like that person who was like told them to do this stuff and then said what they were going to do with it, right? And then this person was just like, oh, I got the stuff. Like, look, I did it. Like, oh my God, like I can't believe it. What do I do now? And it's like, you said what you were going to do now. Like, you already said what you were going to do now, but how do you not, like, what's in there? Like, how did you forget? And I think society in general, like, you know, if you don't know how you got somewhere, that's probably the definition of anxiety. Like I ended up somewhere, I don't know how I got there. And if you don't know how to get back, then you're probably like, even in the smallest way, even subconsciously freaking out.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I want to ask you a question because you've been someone who's had, and I want to tuck into this in a minute, but you've had quite a bit of like what we say, like career success, you know, like, and with that comes the rewards of the financial success and everything. So someone that we interviewed earlier, a guy named Matt, he was talking about like, man, you know, and he works in technology as well. It's like the grind of these projects. Like I wouldn't see my kids for like a month, or like, you know, I'd be working like 60-hour weeks over and over and over again. He said, I finally gotten to a place where I can figure out how I want to do life again. But like, I've lost track of my friends. Like it was a huge burden on my wife. I missed a lot of stuff with my kids. Mm-hmm. That tracks with me with what you're saying is like, if you're a billionaire, you basically probably surrendered part of your humanity.
I mean, the SEC owns you at a certain point.
Right.
You're just like following the rules.
And like I relate back to like my own company that I've built up. It's like, unless you know what it's like to work that hard, you only have an idea of what hard work is.
Right. It's a joke. When people don't know, it's a joke.
And you do surrender part of your humanity. I actually remember at one point feeling like, I actually don't even feel like a human being anymore. I just feel like someone who works. And like, that's all I do. Until you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I can kind of like reclaim that. You brought up an interesting idea though, that if you get to a level of success where it's not like, oh, I've built a cool company or a cool career, but you're like, oh, like I'm a multimillionaire or a billionaire, there might just be a detachment from humanity that comes with that, because you get so high that conceptually you want to help, but you're so detached from what it means to be like a human being that you would want to help, that you just don't know the process there. Yeah. So how do you bridge that gap then from these celebrities or these ultra influencer type people. How do you bridge that gap between, let's say, like an operator like you, someone who's actually in the community who can help? Like, how do we bridge that gap so that these people can do the things that they say they want to do?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know what it is, and I think my mom will attest to this because she's just like so overly confident about it. It's just like I can find patterns like that. You know, I'm sure there are people who like this. I'm sure there's a name for it. But if I can find a pattern really fast, so that means I could probably see where pieces can meet up. How you get there and how if I have those pieces in place that are actually built, that's a whole different story. Lucky for me, design thinking is something that I got to learn pretty early in my career. And in theory, that's all it is me extrapolating some stuff from people, extracting it, and then showing it back to them. It's so therapeutic, right? I'm extracting them to like, this is what you heard. Is this what I'm hearing, right? And so by learning that opportunity, I got to learn alongside like really amazing designers that were very humble, right? And amazing designers, but we're trying to solve a problem. You know, we're not trying to be cool. No one was going to make them cool. I just was put in a scenario where like, it was like a dojo almost. And like some of the design leaders I've had in my career, like I have to take my hat off and just be like, how did that happen for me? But like in that process, you know, I think I realized that a couple things, like one, there's a list of things I won't do, right? And as a designer, like I actually can create intent. That's a scary tool. Like I can really, and I don't know how good others designers are, but I learned pretty early, I can create some pretty quick intent for anybody. Like words, I can use lines, and it was just like, oh shit, I can make someone do something that they had not previously planned. That level of manipulation, like, should not be ignored, you know? And but with great power comes responsibility, right? Here we go. But what that means is that, okay, I noticed that I'm a Cancer. People were like, "Oh, you can manipulate people easily." They kept like the recurring themes kept showing up. You can make people think things, and I'm like, all right, shit. I don't want to be someone that people think I'm doing that, right? And so I just, like you, I learned how to ask a question to the point where I can help guide a horse to water, right? When I'm not speaking about like my thoughts, my ideas, my biases, I'm like, I see where we need to go. I'm not putting him in a position where I'm like walking you somewhere. I'm leading you. We're just like, you know, like how do I help you see what I'm seeing? Because whatever God's reason, he let me see it in my head visually. I can see the answer.
Right.
And I'm like, shit, everybody else can't do that. Okay, cool. That acceptance was hard in the beginning, but like once people like, I can't see it. You know what I mean? I was like, okay. How do I do it? I became an illustrator first. That was like my Da Vinci like quest. I was like, I'm going to be Da Vinci one day. My quest is I'm going to be the greatest illustrator anyone's ever dealt with. I don't think that's the case, but like I'm really good at illustrating.
Okay.
Whether it's a cartoon or person, my grandfather was a medical illustrator. Everybody in my family can draw. My brother, my sisters, everybody can draw. It was like a pastime thing. If you were in the house, you were bored, wasn't on TV, you were drawing. You open up some of his books, you draw lions, you draw legs, you whatever. So we kind of got this training of just like I said, being explained something, but the show and tell aspect of that, those pieces put together allowed me to allow people to have a discovery moment and an aha moment that is a lot more valuable than an answer.
Yeah.
Because answers do not exist, right? And so if I tell you, let's use this cup or that cup or this cup, they're all right. This shit fits in there. You can put whatever you need in there. It's going to fit. Why you would use a cup, though, let's figure that out. Let's ask some good questions. Like, I need a spout. You need a spout. We're both pretty lame with aiming at our mouth. So like we both need spouts, right? And then somebody else is like, I got big teeth. I don't want to deal with that. And so like everybody making sure that we're communicating about this. And I always say like these 3 C's, like, cause I'm a C person, I'm a Cam. And so it was like communication, competition, right? In the design work, has to compete, and confidence. Right. And I learned a long time ago just to work with education, all these different programs, just consulting. That's the most invisible stat. It's the most invisible. It's an energy that you can't recreate. They just need to have it already. Right. And I was like, all right, how do I just aim at that? Right. I don't want to like go around it anymore. It's like, how do I make a person more confident? And in seeing that, like celebrity, right, they want to make sure they're very confident. Right? Maybe sometimes too confident, right? And you have a person who has a lot of knowledge and they're not that confident. And so, and I always make this framework of like information and understanding. It's like we're always tugging against those two things. And so it's like one person might have all the information, one person has all the understanding of how to translate, how to tell somebody. But why you would use them or use each other is not that apparent. And so I stopped trying to like solve the big picture of like blah, blah, blah. I started creating like trusting environments where people were just talking about things. Mm-hmm. And I stopped asking questions that were about the bias goal of the answer and more about the bigger picture and be able to switch to between micro and macro without everyone trying to track me. You know what I mean? And like overall, designers get into trouble because someone's trying to clock them and then be like, but I don't want to do it that way. You know? And you're like, motherfucker, I'm the designer. Like you asked me, but like the reverse of like an engineer, he's not gonna be in that scenario. He's doing his code. Yeah, he gets peer reviews, everything's like he's doing code, but no one's standing over me like, well, I don't know if that's how I would do it, you know? And like, yeah. And so we have this like invisible, you know, I see it, so I also have an opinion problem where either you take that ego that you're gonna have along the way and be like, let him answer, you know, let him answer somewhere else. you'll make your way to answer and things and say stuff. But in the midst of it, it's like, I don't actually care what the answer is. Yeah. I know for a fact it's going to work because I'm not going to make something that doesn't work. Yeah. Right? I told you I have a list of things I'm not going to do. And that's number one. I'm not going to make something that doesn't work, like form to function, right? Not that I'm sorry, I do function to form. Some people argue the opposite. Mine has to work, right? And that's where I focused on realizing I'm a designer, not an artist. I am an artist to some degree, like I create art, but I do want that thing to work. I want it to have a call to action. I want somebody to think something and go do it. I don't want somebody to end on that moment of thought.
Yeah. So let's talk about your career. First of all, before we get into your career, tell us about where you grew up and just kind of like the transition into finding your path.
Sure. Like I said, I started in the projects. I was in multiple projects growing up, just moving around. My mom was in the Coast Guard, but she had drug problems and all sorts of stuff. She had multiple kids.
And where were you in the country?
Okay, so
where did you start?
Where did I start? There's argument whether or not I was born in California or not. That's the whole thing. But let's just say I was in St. Louis most of that time.
Okay.
Yeah. Because that's where I got all the formative information and learning and all those things. But I got a lot of training from a lot of cities. Let's just say that. Like not even just that. Like in the midst of that, my grandparents and aunts and uncles, all these people in my family, there's a lot of people. They believed in the village concept. So it was like, every kid was, going around and, staying in summers here and doing time here. And you get to know your cousins. And, we had a lot of community because of that. So luckily, that kind of overshadowed some of the, nuclear issues that were just kind of dealing with themselves.
Uh-huh. So in that, do you want to talk about your mom a little bit? You mentioned there's some, she had some problems with drugs.
Oh, yeah. She had problems with drugs. It was the times, everybody had it. My dad had problems with drugs. Everybody pretty much had problems with drugs. The community we're in, the economic, situation we were in, I'm sure there was a group of people who weren't in that situation, a group of people who had money, and like slowly everybody got out of it. And then kind of just shuffled the kids around as that happened. But I mention my mom a lot because, inadvertently, she's the one that fueled whatever overconfident amount of energy I have. Somebody, I along the way, I had to make it more humble, but like, she's, for better lack of a term, like she's just like Kanye's mom. Like she's like, that's my baby. Like he's the best one ever. Like I'm the champion. I'm like, she says that 24/7. So my confidence never, I didn't think about it till later in life, but I was like, man, I've never really been in a scenario where I'm not that confident. I learned how to be humble and like build, I have confidence about this much, but it's like, I don't know this much, like I might not tell anybody, but like, I might spend my time and like get confident. But I started to learn like, oh man, she really, really, really instilled my confidence at an early age to just run through things.
Yeah. And so the reason I want to follow up about what's going on at home, can I share a little bit with me?
Yeah.
So I grew up, there's a lot of like mental health challenges in my family growing up. And, there was like a stable instability. That was it. It was like predictable days, but you never knew what was going to happen, but you always had a place to sleep. You always had food, all of these things. But it was like, I remember being in my home and feeling super uncomfortable ever since I was a little kid. And then also I'd go to school and I got like totally bullied and all of that. So it was like, there was no place where it was okay. Like everything was not okay. And I learned early on, just keep your eyes open all times, be ready all times. And it wasn't like I was getting physically abused. It's just like anything could happen at any time is how I grew up. So the reason I'm asking you is like, and I asked you specifically what's going on with your mom and then the moving around so many places is like, you got this focus on community and like the name itself, Circle Black. Can you tell me about like how you came up with that name?
There's like a bunch of phonetic reasons around. Like when I name something, it has like so many things built into it. But you said it multiple times. You didn't realize it. The phrase "circle back." It makes people think about circling back to something. Also, like being very specific and obvious. Like it means choose us.
Yeah.
It just means choose us. It doesn't mean over somebody else. It doesn't mean instead of somebody else. It's like, oh, just sometimes you can circle black. You can circle us. Just choose us, right? Go to a black party. Go to a, I've gone to Jewish events, right? I've gone to, Polish parties, right? I've done it, right? People know when they're going to a black party. No one's ever not said it. Going to a black party. So let's just call it. Yeah, you're choosing us. We're choosing us. And that's just what's happening in that moment. And then the BLK, the reason why I didn't say black, like spell it out, is BLK is it really means brown loving kinfolk. So it was like brown loving kin. It was like, it doesn't mean, it's like the diaspora. It's like not like, and everybody's African, right? We're dealing with colorism. We're not dealing with racism. We're dealing with classism and colorism and then the marriage between them. So,
well, the reason I'm asking is like when Spencer first brought up, you said, hey, like let's bring Cam on. I looked at the name and I thought it's almost like putting a circle around being like, okay, let's just wall everything out and focus on each other. Like
some degree, yeah, like, some degree. It's multiple sides, it's multiple points, right? If I'm on the inside, it's like continue to choose us, right? Like let's focus on us. Let's continue to choose us.
So the reason I was asking this in relation to your family is like when someone's grown up in a lot of places, a lot of different cities, had a lot of different faces, a lot of different family members. If there's been some kind of instability, the desire to have like predictability, consistency, like to build a community. From a psychological perspective, has a lot of appeal. I want to build something that's built to last, that's built on community, that's built on safety. And like how much of how you came up informs you building this?
I mean, all of it. I know that like we're programmable. We're, I'm not impervious to being programmable. And I know that like my experience, and I feel bad for, some people who may be overly privileged, is that I'm born with a purpose, right? One that is very existentially right in front of my face. Some people call it hypertension, but really just means I'm going to be bothered. I'm going to be bothered and I'm never going to get to forget a lot of things about who I am, what's going on around me, what people feel around me. And so knowing that, and I'll be honest, like my sister will tell you, like, I fucking hate buying things. Like, it's fun, right? I went to go earn the money. I got the cool watch, but what do you think it's like buying it? Ryan Coogler just got arrested getting $12,000 out of his own bank account yesterday. You know what I mean? And he's Ryan Coogler. Yeah. So Ryan, and this is my favorite example of people. I look like a lot of black celebrity look-alike things. Sort of like, who are you? I get this a lot. Who are you? Who are you? But on the flip side, I don't get that protection, right? And so like seeing where one slip of and I could be just a disappearing wind. And I've been arrested multiple times for no reason. And in seeing that happen, I realized how quick communities fall apart. We're really built on a lot of trauma and communities being pulled on. And my own brother-in-law, like my sister had a husband. He had 3 daughters. He's dead now because people found out he had money and they robbed him. There's so many things that will preserve my purpose, right? And it's like, luckily there's so much racism and colorism that like I don't get the chance to forget, right? And that's a cool amount of fuel, right? Somebody's mad about that, but I learned that that's a fuel. That's just a fuel. And that started it because like, once you move from your mom who's like going through all this stuff, and then you move your grandma who's like, she worked at the Pentagon for 30 years. She sludged it, she accomplished so much. She went through all this stuff. She was quiet. She learned how to get through the room. She learned how to deal with crazy words. And like, it was this juxtaposition between those two of like poise. She taught me how to like be poised, how to create charisma in a room and like dispel any, like whatever I'm going to deal with and be like, maybe I can thwart it before it starts. Like there's a lot that two sides kind of, my mom spiritually was just like, she made I mean, I don't feel bad about this. She made a warrior. I'll fight anybody. I'll go through any problem. But like my grandmother harnessed it, and that allowed like me to because she was in like community building, and my mom was in community building, but it was almost like the scenario made you have to be in constant community building for both of them.
Right.
And then like, I'm not finished. And like, in seeing all of that happen, I started to realize like the amount of work that they did was a lot of work to just have, to some degree, so little. You said it earlier, like, where are my friends? Where did all this stuff go? And it kept happening. And it was like, I don't want to be 50 with no friends. I don't want to be whatever age or whatever place I'm at and feel like I'm alone. And I never necessarily went through that and it's weird because I'm constantly an observer. Like my nickname is I give myself bored talent. And it's because when I'm bored, I just go learn something. I'm just like, oh, I'm bored. I'll learn something. I shut out the world. I'm just like, and learning something. And then if I can, I'll go do sports. I'll do other stuff, and it allows me to socialize. But I'm sort of putting these mechanisms that allow me to continue to thrive, And I'm like, oh crap. I'm just like, it's just happening, right? I'm not thinking about it. But in doing, like realizing the simple mechanisms just intent and in place, community will thrive on its own. And it was more like, this is easy than I had this destiny to do it, right? I didn't come into it thinking like, I'm gonna be a leader of a community. I was just like, why isn't this, like, what's wrong with this? And everyone was like, you're the leader. And I was like, ooh, that, what does that mean that they think that? And how do I like adapt in that environment? Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I did want to capture though, like that idea of like, you have such different experiences from your family of origin. Mm-hmm. You early on develop a learner's mind. So you're constantly observing, picking things up. A lot of people who have experienced like trauma develop learner minds. Like they're trying to figure their way out of something. Yours is a little bit different though, because like a learning mind that comes from trauma can be like avoiding things or like looking at patterns and just being like, I don't want to be in those situations again. Yours seems to be different, where it's like, I want to learn as much as I can about everything so that I can go and like dismantle these systems and create different options and create different circumstances. So tell us about your career. Like, how did you find your path towards into being a designer?
I wanted to be a game designer for the reason you just said, right? I want to learn all this stuff. Again, I wanted to be like Da Vinci. I wanted to be able to sculpt anything, paint anything, draw anything, build something that works, right? Like a helicopter, whatever, invent. And game design allowed me to see that in 3D space, I'm sort of given this clean slate of like, maybe you're not going to be an architect and like solve all these things in real world, but you can go learn how to design them and make them in a 3D space. I'm still going to have to learn the rules, right? It has physics. It tells me things. It's going to tell me things like, oh, this space, this pillar doesn't work. All sorts of like left brain things, all sort of right things. In the process though, I learned like I would never get along in that community in my entire life, ever. I grew up in projects. I played basketball. It's all these things about me, and a gamer community is like acid. Acid is not going to work. And I was like, there's reasons why I didn't go to certain private schools, because I was like, there's certain things I can't let be said to me. It doesn't work. I have something to say. And so knowing that early was like helpful to me. Like, okay, don't go down this path. But what does that mean in your overall skill set? How are you going to use what you've learned? You know how to make clothes because characters need clothes. You know how to make all these things because like in a game, like you need a car, you need an airplane, you need all these things that you design and come up with to be functional and useful and thought through. And now you're putting a space where like all commerce is like not thought through. All business ideas are like, it's because I think it, and it was like, I had to leave a space because I knew I wasn't going to fit in it and allow myself to thrive in it, to a space where like, it was just bravado. I was like, what? Like, business is just purely who's yelling, like loudest. It's like, that sucks. But I found out that in design, through what I was thinking I was going to do, there was this parable there that didn't have a name yet. And I saw it as sort of like, there's this mixture of like wayfinding into the digital space, right? And that's how I saw it in the beginning. I'm just going to get into wayfinding in digital spaces, right? And that could turn into like a screen that helps you get somewhere, or like, I was like, oh, this is like a physical space where I'm designing how to move in it. So conferences, I would do like production stuff, and it was like, oh, this is cool. Like I'm actually being able to shift and tell a story, and they're letting me. And then some of the projects went from, just an event thing to like, oh, we want people to fill out this thing on this little tablet, and it's like, I could figure that out. I don't know. And I created this email address called I could do that for you at Gmail. And I was like, that's be my freelance email. And I'll just honestly apply to any old thing. And then whoever says yes as a client, I'll just say yes. I was doing like landscape design. I was doing like all sorts of random stuff. Cause when I was in college, I was just like, let me just see what happens. Like if I say no, I don't have any like responsibility. Like I don't need like to pay all these crazy bills, but like, let me just see what people let me get away with. And so I just said yes to so much stuff, like stuff that didn't make any sense. And I was just designing anyway. I got into like Christmas lights, like designs and like buildings. I was like, I did Tony Hawk's house. That was crazy. And then
Wait, you designed Tony Hawk's house?
No, I designed the Christmas lights display for his home. It was ridiculous.
That is sick.
It was pretty cool though, because his backyard had some cool shit. But just in being allowed, sort of by forcing myself to be allowed to do all these different things, it made me realize how I can use physical space and design together. And so it was like early IoT before IoT was cool, right? And like I was just thinking about how spaces will evolve and how like, oh, if I did this, like how would this thing happen? And then phones came out. And so I started an agency with my friend Rick. He's a crazy person. He's a one-eyed Jack. But Rick, me and him, we just, like we said yes to everything. And at the time we were just kind of aiming at mobile website projects, some photography stuff that was big budget. And we like got all of it. And we were like, what are we going to do? And so we hired a bunch of people. We were just like, help us. And they were just like, okay. And then, like, we just like hired 4 people. We started building stuff. We ended up with like 73 clients. We get lost and bored. And we're like, we keep saying yes. We're running around the country. We don't really know everything we're doing. This is fun. But me, like being in a scenario where I don't feel like I'm learning and I feel like I'm just doing, I had like a little panic. I was like, I feel like do I know what I'm doing? You know what I mean? If I don't feel like I'm learning while I'm doing, I'm like, am I just on a cliff, And so we ended up selling the agency to a larger agency. And then I got some structure and learned and like much more understanding of like, oh, there's a hierarchy you can build in a company. And like, there's these things you can do. And like, there's people who have different skill sets. And I was like, oh, everybody's not going to play, wear 100 hats. And I was like, no, and so I got to learn all that. He sent me back to school. And that's when I really got to deep dive into my design career before I started getting into the more risky things.
Yeah. So along that path, building up this company, selling it and having it be this like kind of wild, like we're doing everything and then going into something more structured.
Yeah.
What did you learn about leadership?
I always say, but I don't know. I always found out when people would just lie, and how long we spend covering up a lie or accepting it, like how long you'll take before you accept the lie. Like that time spent, I've always looked at it as like time we're wasting, like time we're waiting for everyone to, stop bullshitting,
Right.
And I think when I started to also see like I have to be all these different roles and I don't get to see fulfillment from kind of like the problem I wanted to solve. And by having that structure, for me right away, I realized like, oh, them helping me, they freed me up. Like basically by them becoming a leader, I was like, oh, I can be a better leader.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it was the first time I was like 23. I should not have been somebody's UX director. But like we were young. It was like 2008 or 9. And he was like, oh yeah, phones. I was like, dude, I'm making WordPress sites. But like they trusted me. And that was like big, something early that I had not really been given. Someone trusted me. They were like, you're the leader, you decide.
Yeah.
And I was like, somewhere between like, am I? And like, I think I know what to do, And so I moved at a pace that was trying to answer both questions, right?
Yeah.
Where I was like asking my peers, am I doing this right? And then I was like asking my leaders, is this what we want to do? And then I started finding out what to ask my subordinates. And I was like, oh, everyone didn't expect me to have all the answers. Like I just need to be in the know. I just need to be aware. Awareness was more focus, was more of the currency than like, you're going to have all the answers. So I was like, oh, okay. But at the time, CEO, Dan Cobby, I think he just he did such a good job of being present, being available, and being like able to talk to you in like calm, chill ways, but then also be like, come on, guys. And I think that was the first time I realized like that's the type of leader I wanted to be. Like I had never seen a good leader, and then like the come on guys thing had so many things built in it. It was like, oh, he'd already built the trust. He'd already you already set boundaries and talked about what you are going to do and not going to do. So when he's saying, come on, guys, it's not like he has to go through all this effort and energy of like really like whipping a group of people together. And I hated the idea that like they're here to be whipped, and I was like, I'm not doing this. But I love helping people learn something. And so I was more focused on like, hey, how can I help you be a better designer? And then now we just make sure we're all following the right structure to execute something. And I just was in the right position at the right time. And then before I knew it, I was being carted off to other leaders who were like, hey, this guy, he's 23, like he's pretty good. And by then, sort of the history's written for me. Like when you're the one black guy who's like, he's pretty smart. Like he knows what he's doing. Like he's made me money. Like that's another big thing. Like I made a bunch of people in money pretty quickly. And they were like, all right, I got something. Hey, kid, get over here. And, being unique in a scenario like that, especially like I said in San Diego, where like it's pretty stuffy, and by them letting me in, it kind of created a scenario for me where I can get the purview of what's really going on, like the corporate stuff, but like I wasn't like in the same like hiring, firing danger as like everybody else. I was just like, oh, I'm seeing like the golf course conversations. I'm seeing like what's really going on because they're trying to mentor me and show me stuff. And that was just like happenstance. I mean, I don't know how you get a kid from the projects as a black kid who's 26 years old, like, Brad Smith and like Paul, what's his last name? Paul, I always forget his name because his dad's name is the same. The CEO of Qualcomm, I forgot his name, Paul something. But they're both talking to you in a room, and like if you don't have an existential moment in a second, and like they're asking you what's next, and you're like, I'm 26. Why is he asking me this? Like, I don't know what's going on, and that's that. In that moment, I was like, okay, I may know something, but I just stuck to like these leaders. Like I said, in your bones, you know something, and then like in my character, the character I had to be in front of him, like he had things he was never gonna do, and so I'll say it again, creating the conditions allowed me to like just stop being afraid of where direction I was going and just be like, I'm going to learn something. I'm probably going to make money because like, I've just been, here's the role I'm in, so it makes money. Yeah. And so I kind of, throwing all those things aside, I just started taking leadership as like a responsibility, right? Like I say this a lot, but like, if I'm in charge, that means someone's in charge of me. And if that person isn't clear or visible, then to some degree, that energy or expectation of need from another leader, I need to ask of my people how to be a better leader. Yeah. And in that kind of switch, that was the last like step of like, I started working at startups, and then there is no leader above me now, right? I'm the head of design. I'm the one who has to define like, oh, we have to do UX research. By the way, the research people used to do last year, they don't do anymore, and we don't know what people do now. And it was like, okay, and so my mom fed me with the confidence, and like the poise came in and was just like, hey, why don't I try something? But then I got to ask, right? Like, don't become that lone wolf, right? Don't become that person who's just like, and you've seen that person who's just like, I went all the way over here. It's ready to go. Let's do this. It always goes wrong. And any number of expectations along the way that you haven't communicated to anybody, it's always going to go wrong. And so again, with these patterns of like, trust is amazing. Trust is a great tool, and it is not a tool you build. You actually have to have it. The 3 C's I really cared about, like the communication, the competition, because competition breeds respect as well. And that's important. Like if you're not competitive in your field and I'm not competitive in my field, how are we respecting what we're making, and how are we respectable in the market, right? And so us growing respect in there, and that's how someone learns how to step back, right? And it's like, oh, like he knows what he's doing, and like he's competitive. This guy's a competitor. No, I like it. I don't have to get on his head. He's going to be in the game, and he's going to go hard. Once you know someone's a competitor and they're willing to communicate, it's easy to feed them confidence. And so that to me was like those C's. It was very simple, and I made them up, but then like everyone makes up stuff about how they make relationships, and 100%. If you have these things that you believe are priority, And they keep breeding success. Like you can't fight it, and with the confidence started to build in everybody, I realized like those other two pillars were just going to consistently kind of grow on their own in tandem with everything else.
Oh yeah. All right. As we're coming to the close, I got 3 questions for you, and they're
Go.
hard questions.
Okay.
Anyone who builds something that didn't exist before and just does it, they don't ask for permission, puts themselves in a position where there's going to be a lot of people praising them, and there's going to be a lot of people being like, who are you to do that? Yeah. I'm going to take that a step further. You've put yourself in a lot of positions in your career and in your community where like you're like, no, why wouldn't I be in that conversation? Why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I be in that room? You speak with a lot of confidence. You got a lot of energy. You got a lot of charisma. So people who are daring, they're risk takers, and they don't ask for permission. They just make something happen. They get all sorts of feedback. They get praise, but they also get tough feedback. And that tough feedback could be totally accurate and something that humbles you and you have to learn from. And that tough feedback could be bullshit. And you're just like, oh, you're threatened or jealous or whatever it is. What's a piece of, I'm going to ask you for 2 pieces of feedback, because I know the kind of praise you're going to get, but what's a piece of feedback that you have gotten historically? So you've heard it enough times where you're like, well, at least that's a pattern. That you learned from because you felt it was accurate. And then the second part is, what's a piece of feedback that you've gotten historically a number of times where you're like, you know what, I actually don't think that's true. I think that's coming from a place of fear or jealousy or whatever.
Yeah, the first one I think is the best feedback is slow down and choose grace. Like if what I believe is true, when receiving this image in my head and I'm like, oh, I see the picture, I see the vision, right? If everyone plays a role, it's not about me seeing a vision. It's about me saying, this one could work. What do you all want to do to make it all work for us? And that takes and requires a lot of grace. And a patience when you expect to use fast. Like you can't say like, just slow down. It's like there's a lot of grace in there that was like, be great, be more graceful. And I think because I came from sports, I'm a point guard. I'm the coach on the floor. I'm the quarterback. I was quarterback in high school, and like I was when my coach, he was like, "Oh, run!" And I was like, "No, I'm throwing it." Like I can throw. I'm not here to run. And so there's an amount of like, slow down, be graceful. That automatically solves a number of problems. And I think that when people were trying to give me the feedback, they were like, "I could tell you 12 things." But if you just slow down for yourself, right? Like whatever you believe the space is, or everybody else is going at a certain speed, don't think about that. Slow down for yourself and choose grace, and you're gonna go fine. You're gonna do well. And it bred all sorts of things like humility and like being humble and like handing and delegating in a better format, and like not when something was like, oh, this isn't right, you do it. It's more like, here are the conditions that would make this successful. Here's what's gonna make us get there where we're going, and like showing that grace and saying like, this is how to succeed. It's like, that's grace. And so, but the other side of it was like, there's this like amount of fierceness or passion towards what I'm doing that, you're really passionate and like, you might intimidate people. And I was like, I don't care. I don't care. I've met Kobe and he told me I'm not that different than him. So I have to believe him. And I think my confidence, again, like it comes from some amount of like fighting to do something. And then I end up in a room and then I'm like, look at all these other people in the room. I'm like, well, I can't, be completely off. Right. And I'll start there and try to be humble. Like I can't be completely off, but like the baseline is I'm here, right? I made it to the space. Stand on that. Right. Because a lot of people will tell you how to do things and what to do and parts of your personality that need changing. But I also realized the people who were telling me be graceful were not saying be different, right? They were just saying you are what we need, right? Or whatever you need to be in whatever role we're working on, group of people, right? You're doing what you're supposed to do. Somebody else is doing what they're supposed to do. But you need to make space, right? Versus the other side of it was like, you're too confident. And I was like, but I told you I saw the vision. And every time I see the vision and I show you the vision, it's not that I don't have one. It's not that it doesn't make sense. And that was hard for me because like I spent so much time in my career like I don't actually want to be right. I want to make sense. I want somebody to go, that makes sense. That was the greatest feedback in meetings. Like, those are the quietest meetings in the world. When someone's like, oh, that's right, you're right, they're the smartest. The immediate first thing someone's going to do is try to humble you. Then you're like, oh, I don't know, right? Someone has a feeling, a thought, whatever. I don't know. I know he's not right. Right? And that's something I don't want anyway. I don't want to be right. I told you, this cup, that cup, this cup, they all work. But that makes sense, right? That makes sense was the same thing as be graceful, right? And they was like, because graceful means like we got to where we needed to go. I'm sure we went through some things, right? Because if you need to be graceful, you went through some things, right? But the other thing is like, if that made sense, then it'll make sense without me. And that's something that I try to make true all the time. I don't want me to be the relying factor for something to make sense. Yeah. I don't want to be right. I don't want to be right. And that tenacity, I knew where it came from. And I knew where it wasn't going to serve me by being second fiddle to people who would rather take my ideas and be quiet. And I saw that happen oppositely, where I was like, oh, okay, let me try that. And it was like, oh, that person's just taking credit. And I didn't realize how many people just really honestly want credit. It's really awkward to watch, but it was like, okay, well, that's super important to him. You know, what does that do for me? You know, does it take something away? Does it do this like? But it was like, no, but it really makes me realize like how much I wasn't being myself in the process and showing the work and sharing the work and saying, hey, what do you think? And what does this work? And like being confident and saying like, and being passionate and be like, I think this is going to work. Like, try this, click this. May I have like designed 2 steps ahead of what you asked? Yeah, I did. Because that's what we're supposed to do. Like, if you're asking me to show you what you said, then like, where does that take us? Past what you said. Yeah. I can show you what you said, then they go, what then did you think about this? Yeah. And it's like, well, no, but it's like that person that reacts to that moment, you know the type of leader you're talking to also, right? Like, either there's someone who wants to take credit and they need their ideas to be their ideas, or there's someone who wants things to work for the larger cause. And like, likely if I'm talking to you in that moment with passion, I have a whole bunch of reasons that have nothing to do with me. It's like, oh, and there's this thing that's going to solve, and there's other thing that's real, and there's other thing that I just found out from BA. And you know the customer service does this thing, and they're like making calls about it all the time. We can actually put this button here, and no one had to make any calls. Like, that would probably save us like, I don't know how much money. And they're like, we didn't ask for all that. And I was like, you don't care about your business. And I started to recognize the number of people that, as a leader, they care about their business or they want to be right. And that feedback in that moment of like, you're too passionate, you're too confident, in scenarios where I wasn't being unreasonable, and that's how I judge myself. Is all the time. It's like, am I actually coming with reason, and am I coming with the reason to that is not about me, and I'm trying to solve something? And if people are unreasonable in that moment, then I don't have to like do a lot of math. It's just like, oh, okay, well, you're just tripping. Like,
Can I give you something to consider here?
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen this yourself.
Absolutely.
I know very, very few people, and I'm not saying this is a generalized truth for everyone. It's just maybe the people I met. I know very, very few people who are legitimately successful who haven't been told they're intimidating multiple times. Right. And it's a piece of feedback that I always encourage people to consider. Like, hey, like being told you're intimidating isn't necessarily a bad thing. Right. And it doesn't mean that you should be intimidating or or stop caring about it. Yeah. But what it doesn't mean specifically is that you should start like, I got to change something. Right. I'd say it's like, well, what does intimidation mean in the environment that I'm in? Right. Like, because every environment's different, and every working place is different. Every group of people that works with is different. I would say like deeply understand how is intimidation being defined, understood, expressed, because it's such a broad term.
I think oftentimes when people are bringing it up to me, I don't let people mistreat other people. I don't give a shit what setting we're in. I don't care. If you mistreat a person in front of me, it's not going to sound the best for you.
It's not going to go well.
It's not going to go well. Like, I'm going to have a lot to say, and I'm going to make it very apparent that like, you should stop. And like, I don't care what setting I'm in. It doesn't mean I don't need to get violent. I don't need to yell at people, but like, I'm like, hey, we're not doing that. You know,
you'll take them to task.
I'm going to be like, hey, let's not do that. You know? And like, I learned like, in the beginning, I might've said something like, no, bro, stop. You know, and that people don't like that feeling. Well, you telling me to stop? It's like, okay, I guess a work environment, I can't say that, but you're literally being sexist, which in theory you should be fired for. But like, I'm actually just saying stop. You know what I mean? And now I'm like, okay, well, let me do the book thing. I'm like, okay, guys, let's not do this. You know, and like I started to learn some of those, and I was like, this guy's still running over that.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, let me make it clear. I care about the money I'm getting and some of that stuff, but I'm sent here day to day. And I can tell you what won't happen in front of me. That's when my mom put that thing in there. She was like, you are not, because my mom is small, right? She's 5'2", and I've had to be in many situations where people will feel it necessary to like disrespect her, be mean to her, stuff like that. And I learned at an early age, like I can stop that. I don't have to be mean. I don't have to, like you said, intimidate somebody. Like, but if I come off as intimidating because I'm being very clear and I'm being a matter of facting or ultimatum sounding, it's because it's true. It's like, I don't want to sit here. And the worst case scenario is I don't want this person to feel like they don't have the agency or they don't feel like anyone would protect or say something for them. So it's twofold there that like my heart and my energy won't stop. And like I've lost jobs for it and I don't care.
Can I say something odd about me?
What's that? Go.
I like being surrounded by people who intimidate me.
Yeah.
But I don't mean like physically intimidate me,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, but like, I like being around people who are so smart where I'm like, oh, I kind of feel stupid right now.
Right.
Or I like being around people who are
What
incredible.
makes you want to learn? It makes you feel like a student for that moment.
I love being around people who are incredible athletes. I love being around people who are incredible parents, who are incredible at whatever they do. I love being around people who make me go like, am I good enough?
Am I working hard? Yeah. Am I working hard?
And that might just be a type of mind. Again, I don't want to say that's for everyone, but the way that I always up my game, especially in the past few years, is I just surround myself by people that I find a little like, whoa, if I could just do that.
Honestly, Circle Black has done that for me. Yeah. Like by, you the stories are out of control, but like the type of people who are willing to help me, throw a certain type of event in a neighborhood that's like, ooh, like you have to really care, like, their passion is like what makes it easy. Cause like their passion and this celebrity's passion, they have the passion, but it's like, we're going to do this thing. Chill out. They have programs that they wrote them already. Like, let's bring it together, and that passion still has to come out. We're going to hit these things. We're going to do these things. But Circle Black brings me some of the most amazing people. There's mothers who they do everything in the world. And there's like these guys who like build up half of Philly who like, they're like going directly to people who have guns in gangs. And they're like, yo, I want you to come do art with me. Yeah. And I know you got a gun on you right now. And I know you're a shooter in 2 gangs and they call on you to do hits, but we really want you to come and chill with us, And I'm like, how can I not focus on making a site and like some other stuff if like, that's just the average story. That's an average story for all these people's platforms and things they want to make change from. It's easy.
All right, last 2 questions.
Go.
This one might be the hardest question.
Here we go.
Of any genre, 3 most influential musical, either individual or groups, most influential records in your life.
Okay, you ready?
I'm ready, man.
I'm gonna mess with you a little bit because I'm gonna say 2, and I'm gonna leave the last one for you. Okay. Jay-Z The Blueprint is the greatest album that ever lived. It's not even a question. It's like
okay. Across all albums ever?
Yeah.
Okay.
It has like horns. It's got every instrument you can imagine. Okay. Like, I don't think there's a more cohesive set of songs that all you probably don't know. Like they all went single, basically. They're all singles because they're just all good. Okay, so that's that. I'll leave that alone.
Okay.
That's just automatic. Funny thing is, I when I was a kid, because I would draw a lot, the people who would do the most artwork on their albums were punk. They were punk. And so it was like Black Sabbath and Green Day Dookie. That album with all that artwork on the front, there was like this giant illustrative cloud and like all this crazy stuff going on in there. That made a difference.
Okay.
Like, cause I moved from the projects, and I used to fight like 2-3 times a week. Sometimes it was like 2 people were just like, we want people fighting. 2 kids fighting. That was that. I was fighting. Then there was fighting on the way from home, whatever. When I moved to the county with my grandma, it was like, I have to fight. Like, I can just go to school. This is fun. Like, I don't have to do any of that. And so like, you have this time and all these things that are available to you. And I have these new kids who are like, there's Jewish kids and like, they're friends with me. And then the first thing they showed me was like this album. That music was like, what? And then I got Weezer. I got some other stuff like introduced after I was like, yeah, I'll listen to Green Day. That was like, it opened my mind a ton because of how I entered this space. It just opened my mind. It just opened my mind because they mixed like some hip hop. They like a little bit of like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it was like, I think that particular album in general just opened my mind to a whole bunch of other music. And then like it probably connected with my brother a little bit more at the time because he was a musician, but he was always like making rap and like working with like, you know, rappers at the time, but like he was like into like techno and like, you know, jungle house beats. And like he was doing weird stuff on the side, but then he would like, that was something where I could be like, oh, I was listening to this. And he was like, oh, whoa, like, let me talk to you about it. And I was like, okay, cool. And like I said, it introduced me to so much other music like Nirvana and other stuff that I was not even paying attention to.
These are good answers, man. Well thought out. I'm
John Coltrane is there's a I want to say it's like the Blue River something. That album, because it has one of my favorite songs ever. It's called Naima. And there's some other songs that, you know, I'm sure everybody's heard, but he, you know, when you grow up basically living what Jay-Z's saying, John Coltrane made like the moments in my life have like a pause. And it was like an interlude to like, I get to make a change to something. His music's always been there in a scenario where it was like, I need to go inward a little bit because like lyrics in general don't allow you to do that. But overall, like his music, it has so much depth and has so much like complexity. And obviously people he works with was like some of the most amazing people ever. So it was like the resonance of some of that work was just like, it's ridiculous, you know, because there's so much emotion in that room of people who really like went through it, you know. And I think that's where I really got into like how music feels. Yeah, and he does a lot. He does everything. He does every feeling, you know. He doesn't leave any feeling out. And that was just amazing to me because like I said, it became interludes to like, you know, an important thought that I had on the train, or like this moment where I was like on a bike somewhere and it was just like, oh, I know what to do next. You know, it was just like Naima somewhere in the background, like helping me like, you know, it was just like,
Dude, I want to listen to John Coltrane rap.
Dude,
This is very
we'll play
very
some.
good answer.
No,
All
Naima
right.
is probably the greatest song ever produced.
Final question.
Go.
Easiest of the three, though. As we're closing off, what do you want to hype? Where can people look you up? What should people be paying attention to?
Yeah. Go to circleblk.com. Circle BLK. Look at it. Check it out. We have a shop where you can buy things that are Black made. If you want to support, please come to an event. If you can't, donate to one of the events. Anyone can join the community. It's not like a Black only community. Mm-hmm. It just means it's likely that if you come to the community, you probably like Black people. So you're probably not gonna come. If you come to an event and you don't like Black people, that would be very interesting. But that's all we're hoping. Is like you love our culture and you want to be a part of it. We have plenty of different cultures at our events. A lot of them come through invites through people that have very similar questions. But I don't know, in the beginning, I prefer it that way. I prefer that people go like, oh, like, let's talk about it before I go. And like, what is it? And like by having that conversation, I think people feel like they are opting in, which I think is huge. Like the world in general should have a lot more clear opt-ins instead of programmable moments. But
dude, that is such a cool way of saying it. In fact, I kind of feel now, I guess post-pandemic, people have been opting out and pulling out. And I've never had to intervene in so much like, intervene is the wrong word. I've never had to help walk with people through more mental health crises in the corporate world than I've had to in the past 2 years. And I've never operated more as a therapist in the corporate world than I have in the past few years because I've primarily been a coach. So that idea of opting in, I think it's such a beautiful place to wrap things up. So with that, any last words as we're closing off?
Everyone needs to design the personality and life that they want to live. Design it. It's not going to happen. It's not going to fly out of nowhere. People are operating under a be, do, have model. Or I'm sorry, they want to have, do, be. There's a have, do, be model that people are living in, which means if you have the things and you do the things, you will become the person. It's not true. You need to go be, do, and have. Okay? If you are being the person you intend to be, it's not going to be that hard to have the things that match that person. And it's more than likely that you're going to become and do anything else you want to do, not based on having, because you're already going to be doing it. And by nature of it, you're going to have, right? Everyone said it. It should be said again, right? Oh, yeah. Be, do, have. Please design your life.
All right. With that, everyone, I will see you in the outro. And Spencer, drop the beat. Having a ton of conversations every single week with different people on top of my job, which is, running a company. It's like, it's such an interesting way to reset myself because I have all these great coaching conversations with people. We lead all these courses, and then of course I'm like doing the pragmatics of like running a business. And, I have family, I have friends and all this. Every week I talk to one person, two people, or three people who help me like reframe like, oh wait, I live in a way bigger world. I'm so hyper focused on what I'm doing right now. I live in this world that's so big and has all of these big, beautiful things and also all these crazy, super serious challenges that are like, some are new, some are historic, some are systemic, some are like created by very specific things. And I always get a chance to be reminded of like, hey, there are people out in the world doing things that I don't even know, but the things that they're doing are changing other people's lives significantly. And if I just pay half percentage point of attention to what they're doing, I'm gonna be fueled for how I can help other people's lives, or maybe I'll be able to help them. That conversation with Cam was really cool because that idea of like, oh no, there's this thing that I can do. And like, there's all of these things that should, in theory, bring us together. Like technology should bring us together, but it's actually like causing his community to splinter further apart or have a harder time connecting. And just saying, no, I'm going to change that. And being willing to take that leap and do it is like hugely inspirational. And the idea is like, oh, like, wow, if I can actually just learn a little bit from that about how I can refocus some of my energy to like maybe help Cam or help someone like Cam, or to take something like that and put it into my own world about how I can help and bring people together. It's just a cool thing. And if I was going to leave anyone with anything, like please go back, Circle Black, check it out, get involved, like pay some attention to it. I believe Cam would be like a pretty accessible guy. So like, have those conversations, but also like, never underestimate the ability that you have or the people around you have to make a change. And I know right now it could feel like, oh, I'm just like a leaf in a river. I have no power here. I'm going to challenge that. It's about looking for the things that you can do and then just be willing to do them. The things that other people aren't doing, the opportunities that are having the guts to do it. Cam's a great example of that. So everyone, as we're closing off, if you haven't yet, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. I'm your host, Aram, and this is One Step.